Hello! Happy Thursday! Happy Friday Eve! How are you guys doing? I kind of like that that playlist I had going. Hopefully it didn't get muted for some reason. Thanks, Truid. For some reason, Twitch still doesn't recognize that Pixabay is royalty free, so I keep trying new ones, new playlists to see if they won't get muted. Anyway, that last little clip was called Everything is Possible. So I like that. Well, I was waiting for I always wait for that first commercial to get through for, so people can join. I have had these on my desk since Jill and I did the pincushion episode. Hey, Kate. And so we did the pincushion episode. And I had these little tomatoes. They're from Dritz. I have a little bag of them. And I'd used them to put on top of a package for, I guess it was maybe a Christmas or two ago, for a crafty friend. And, they're little tomato pincushions. And I thought, wouldn't these make really cute earrings? I'm certain somebody has already done that with these. But yeah, I might make some of those for the holidays. Perhaps a crafty friend will get them. So I hope you guys have had a good week. I feel like a broken record, but like, where'd the week go? It's, it always feels like it's like Zoom and it's here, the weekend. And then of course you blink and the weekend's over. So I have lots to show you today. As promised, I have my Richmond Folk Fest, pictures and little video clips, and I will warn you up front, they're not great. It's difficult to get good pictures and video a lot of times, just with the phone. Now, my husband is a photographer. It's his sort of part-time hustle. And he did not bring his camera this year because he's like, it was raining. Weather might have been bad. Then it was really hot. He didn't want to drag around the equipment. So anyway, we really didn't get great stuff. But it's better than nothing. But before we get started, I had two things to show you. The first one, I found it just kicking around in my phone while I was looking for some other stuff. This. And I forgot that I had taken this picture. And hopefully you can see it. Let me do my other screen. So here's the picture. Now, Three's Company plays on the cable channel IFC most of the day on Wednesdays. And often Wednesdays are the day that I don't have anything on my calendar. So maybe have, sat on the couch sewing and watching Three's Company all day on occasional Wednesdays. But recently I caught this episode. And you could see this box that Mr. Roper is holding. This is the best snapshot I could get of it because they moved so fast. And there was another one where he turned the box where you could see it better. But the box, I think it was the box itself. I don't think it was wrapping paper because I think they just, open the top of the box the way they do in sitcoms. But anyway, it is definitely... They're definitely quilt blocks, and they look like crazy quilt blocks, but almost like modern ones. So I was really interested, and obviously this is like 1970 something, late 70s. This was an episode that Chrissy was still in, so Suzanne Summer was the earlier episodes. And I can't remember what year Three's Company started. I think I was pretty little, although I remember my parents watching it, so... Anyway, I just thought this was so great. With Quilt Nerd, we used to often take pictures of quilts in the wild on TV shows and stuff and post them in the Discord group. And so I'm always on the lookout because the quilt images will come up in the strangest places and very unexpected. And I just think it's fun and it's cool. So I had to share that. And, if you're ever watching Three's Company... Look out for that episode. Oh, true. Let's see. From 77 to 84. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So from the time I was 4 until I was 10. 8 seasons. Wow. It was a good show. there's a major theme that did not age well. If you guys have ever watched Three's Company, you know the fact that Jack was pretending to be a gay man to be living with two women, and that, you know, all of the stuff that goes along with that really has not survived well. But you still have to, you know, you have to give it credit for some of the themes that they covered, and you know, just the silliness. Hey, Mama, how are you? It's been a minute. I hope you're doing well. So, the other thing I have to show you guys. So, you know, I was, of course, doing all my Sioux research, my Sunbonnet Sioux research. And, oh, good, Mama. It's, you know, we're finally out of the rain here in central Maryland. It is finally sunny today, and it is glorious outside. I went out to get the mail, and I was like, oh man, I should have gotten up early so I could have gone outside. I will be going outside after this. Got to touch some grass, enjoy the weather. Because, you know, I say this a lot. In the mid-Atlantic, we have like a handful of days that are perfect. Either things are, you know, beautiful day but too humid, or, you know, it gets too hot or it gets too cold, and, you know, we only have a few of those perfect days. It's like that everywhere, I'm sure. But anyway, I will be taking part in that for just a little bit this evening or this afternoon. So anyway, as you guys know, as I was doing my Sunbonnet Sioux research, I kept coming across just oddball Sunbonnet Sioux things. And I've pivoted a little bit. You know, of course, I always have my eye out for fun Sunbonnet Sioux stuff because, I mean, I will always be collecting it. I don't know, from a research standpoint. Oh, Kate, 109? Are you kidding me? Oh, that just makes me want to melt. Oh, Lord. I hope your air conditioning was cranking. So, you know, I have become quite choosy about my Sunbonnet Sioux stuff. And mostly at this point, it's like the really, really interesting or the really, really just oddball and rare, perhaps. And then, of course, I've started my bicentennial research. Well, I was looking for this particular bicentennial book. It was about one of the bicentennial quilts, and the organization or the little locality that had made the quilt had actually put out a little bound book. And I found a couple of really cool stuff. Like there's one that did a cookbook around their quilt, and then there's these other ones that just kind of did a documentation. And it, best I can tell, it's a lot of text. It's mainly just description kind of stuff. Kind of takes me back to Dr. Dunton. You know, he didn't have color photography, so he described everything in detail when you couldn't really see it. Anyway, long story short, I was looking for that book, and somehow, I don't know what combination of things I typed in, but this book showed up. And I just got it today. It just came in the mail today. It took it a while to get here. This is the weirdest, most, I don't know, this strange thing. All right. So this is the book, and you can see there's this woman, and it is called Sweet Sue and Her Bonnets and Bicentennial Beauty Quilt Patterns. Like, what? What kind of weird, bizarro world is it where there is some type of little publication that was a mashup of both of my recent research topics? And I saw this thing, and of course, I bought it off of Abe Book. So this was kind of a sight unseen thing. For all I knew, it was just going to be this and nothing else, like nothing in it. So this is what we've got in here. Here's the contents. We've got Sweet Sue and Her Bonnets. Then we've got blocks 1 through 12, each one. Then we have Bicentennial Beauty. Then we have cross-stitch motifs on multiple pages, I think 4 different pages. So there's a whole description that I have not yet had a chance to read, but it's mostly instructions on how to make this. It's got a layout. It's kind of interesting. It has you moving the blocks kind of around in different order, I guess. So you have multiple of them, but and then there's a color code. There's a color guide. I mean, this is a very paint by numbers kind of situation. And so these are the Sues. And, you know, they're not really Sunbonnet Sues. You know, they're women in hats. This one's kind of close to a Sue. They're not really Sunbonnet Sues. They're just women in hats. And really they're called Sweet Sue. So, you know, I don't even know if they were even intending for these to be like Sunbonnet Sue. It's Sweet Sue and her sunbonnet, or her bonnet. So anyway, this goes on. There's so many of them. But yeah, I mean, they are marked with what the colors should be and everything. And it's kind of disappointing because you really don't have a color picture of what this thing is supposed to look like. So anyway, I won't bore you with all the rest of them, but I mean, we've got her like a full front pose here. And then we jumped to Bicentennial Beauty, which I'm thinking, oh, this is it. This has got to be it. This is the Bicentennial Beauty quilt. No, it's an Afghan. And you can see this woman. She is she even knitting? I'll be honest. Well, yeah, she doesn't really seem to have any kind of a hook or needles in her hands. She has a ball of yarn and she's holding on the edge. Now, there could be a crochet hook or a needle, like knitting needles down in her lap. You just can't see them. So this is obviously a staged portrait. They were like, let's see, what is her name? June Brooks. They said, June, sit here in your chair. And she lives on Vashon Island, Washington. And they said, Sue, or June, sit here in your chair and we're going to take a picture. Act like you're knitting. You know, that's how this stuff goes down. So anyway, the Bicentennial Beauty is the one that's over here. And here it is. And, you know, I mean, it's some patterns of bicentennial-y things. We've got a Liberty Bell. We've got kind of an eagle motif, the shield, a star. We got a bow and arrow. We got a candle or a lantern. We got a gun, a boot. So some of these things are bicentennial, perhaps. Some seem to be manifest destiny. And the cross-stitch motifs are also indeed the knitting or crochet, whichever this is. Okay, so it asks for an Afghan hook. So I'm trying to remember how Afghan hooks are aren't they like knitting needles that kind of have a hook at the end? Is Anon Maker here? she's a weaver and a spinner and a knitting person. She knows these things. Anyway, I'm not exactly sure how to do this. It's weird, but anyway, I mean, this is the rest of the book. Are these patterns here? Yeah, there's a longhorn steer, I guess. You can see a little house, a boot, a boat. Anyway, this thing was put out in 1976 by Tower Press in Seabrook, New Hampshire. And that is the sum total of this item. But I don't know, which collection does it go in? Bicentennial or Sue? I don't know. Anyway, I thought you guys would get a kick out of that. It's you know, sometimes you take a gamble when you buy books, and this one was worth it though. All right, so those were the two things I wanted to show you. Let us go ahead and jump into the Richmond Folk Fest. I found out a few things about the Folk Festival, which are interesting. So first of all, let's see. Then I want to get... So, the history of the Richmond Folk Festival is very... It is very intertwined with the National Folk Festival. And so what I have read, and I kind of went through this pretty quickly, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I apologize. It is just it's a web page, but I think it'll be okay. So, thenationalfolkfestival.com. I'll put that link in here, just so if you want to read ahead, you can. So essentially, this came about in the 30s. I was surprised. I didn't expect that this had been around that long. But the 30s was an interesting time. They were definitely looking at cultural stuff and, you know, the WPA and the New Deal projects, like all that stuff. They're looking at like handcraft and design, and they're looking at all this stuff. So it's kind of interesting. It almost feels like it sort of dovetails with, you know, the stuff that's going on at the time, despite the fact, you know, the United States is in a Great Depression. But I thought this was interesting. Eleanor Roosevelt was a big supporter of the National Folk Festival. And, you know, the goal, so at the time, folk festival meant something different than the way it was then applied in the 30s. And they said it was basically like monocultural event. So what I'm thinking is it was probably things like, you know, a folk festival about a community, you know, and the things that the people in that community did. But with the National Folk Festival becoming a thing, they applied this to a new definition that really meant all kinds of cultures just, you know, displaying their work or their whatever they do, you know, whether it's craft or singing or dancing or whatever. Zora Neale Hurston was involved with the National Folk Festival. And, you know, this is Jim Crow time. This is very segregated, and, you know, even Washington, D.C. was also still very segregated. And so, you know, this is something that it's kind of surprising that this stuff, you know, that there were Black Americans that were involved. There's a quote in here that I really liked. Well, so a couple things. First of all, they talk about the first event of national stature to present the blues, Cajun music, a polka band, a Tex-Mex conjunto, a sacred harp ensemble, Peking opera, and the list goes on. These are still the things that get highlighted in these folk festivals. So one thing I love, this was written about in the Chicago Tribune in 1937 in the Festival Review, and it said, a comparison of accordions and accordion technique by German, Polish, and Louisiana French players was actually quite stimulating. Is that not cool? I mean, you think about how accordions and concertinas are used in different cultures. You know, German and Polish, you got polka, right? And then Louisiana French, the Creole, that's a totally different kind of accordion. Like, it's a different sound. So I think that's so cool. People that come together, you know, I've seen ones where it's like percussion instruments, you know, so you get this panel of people that, you know, coming from different cultures that are drum players or, you know, some type of percussion instrument player. And they come together and they'll, you know, play the sound that they play and like compare it with each other. It's so very cool. And then here's another one. Leota Ware was a child when she came to the 1936 National in Dallas. And by the way, this did start in DC, but it moves around. Like, it started moving around the country. And that is what spurred these local folk festivals like the Richmond Folk Festival. So I'll get back to that in a minute. But so this Leota Ware, she is was with the Kiowa Indian dancers, and it doesn't say where she's from exactly, but it says but she said all these people of different colors and different talk were sitting in the dining hall having supper when we got there. Texas and Oklahoma were segregated then, and I had not seen, so I'm guessing she's from a tribe or a nation that's located in Texas, Oklahoma. I guess that could be Cherokee. I apologize. There's way too many Indian nations. There's like, what is it, like 6,000? It's a lot. But anyway, Texas and Oklahoma were segregated, and I had not seen Black people and white people and Indians eating together. This is 1936. It made a big impression on me, and I talked about it when I got home. I told my grandmother, and she said heaven will be like that. Oh my God. That really got me. So Eleanor Roosevelt was, so the folk festival went to Washington, D.C. for 4 years, and Eleanor Roosevelt was very involved in it. And check this out. The festival was presented at Constitution Hall. I've been there. I've seen music. I think I saw Edie Brickell and the New Bohemians there. And so the Constitution Hall was, which is owned and operated by the Daughters of the American Revolution. And at the time, it was rigidly segregated. And in 1939, celebrated opera singer Marian Anderson was famously denied the stage because, again, Jim Crow laws, an incident that prompted Eleanor Roosevelt to relinquish her membership in the DAR. Like, that's a big deal. And I had never heard about that before. So that is so interesting. And that tells you even more about, Eleanor Roosevelt. And so then it goes on. And I won't prolong this history piece, but you can read it yourself. But it goes on and talks about where this went, this festival. It went to Dallas, it went to Lowell, Massachusetts, it went to Richmond, Virginia. The Virginia suburbs right outside of DC. If you've ever been in this area, Wolf Trap is a very well-known venue. It was brand new in the 70s. It went there, and so the way it has worked is, so they were at Wolf Trap for like 12 years, and then they started doing these like 3-year like stints, I guess. They would go and have the festival at a particular city for 3 years, and then they would move on to a different one. So I think that's kind of how the Richmond Folk Festival got its start, is that the National was there for 3 years, and then they left, and then Richmond did its own thing. And some of these artists are kind of part of that whole festival circuit. So you might miss one in one city and be able to pick it up in another city. So right now, 13 sites and across the United States. And let's see, the Offspring, what they call the Offspring, are Lowell Folk Festival in Massachusetts, the Flood City Music Festival in Pennsylvania, the Richmond Folk Festival, the Montana, the North Carolina, which is in Greensboro, and the Maryland Folk Festival in Salisbury. So those are ongoing. So, and anyway, and then we've got a whole bunch of different statistics and stuff. So very cool thing. And they have a lot of other information in here. So check that out if you're interested in this stuff. It's pretty neat. Let's see, back here for a moment. Get my PowerPoint back up. All right. Make sure that my desktop audio is available because I've got clips. All right. So I think I showed you guys my t-shirt the other day. As many times as we've gone to this thing, we never buy t-shirts. Because I'm always like, I have too many t-shirts. My husband, however, is a big hat person. He wears hats, baseball hats, trucker hats all the time. So we picked this one up, and I actually wore it because my face was burning. Despite having sunscreen on, I sweated it off in the first 5 minutes and then was getting crispy. So we bought this one for me to wear. So I took a picture of it. I intended to put it on Instagram and then totally forgot. Okay, so as we got there, we wanted to see Bombino, who I told you a whole bunch about, and you're going to see a clip of him. But the festival was laid out very oddly. And you know what? Let me jump back to me again so I can show you something. So this is the little program, and I have these from every year we've been. I've saved them. So this is a map of what it looks like down there. And this part down here, these are the islands. So Browns Island and then Bell Island, which is this little piece down here. And then there's the James River, which is like at the very bottom. And then this little bit here, this bit of blue here, that's the canal. And it's a walkway. It's really pretty down there. It's a very cool little area. Now, this part here is where Tredegar Ironworks is, and it is a national park, and the Civil War Museum is there. And there are also a couple of federal buildings down here, including a federal the regional Federal Reserve that's in Richmond is literally right down here, like up the hill. But also, this organization called CoStar, they are a multinational conglomerate of real estate stuff. They own apartments.com, which is probably where most of you might have heard of them. They own a whole bunch of other stuff. Germany, France. It's a whole bunch of stuff. Unfortunately, they have one building. They are building another one, and it is right here. And they do this great thing, of course. They sponsor this. They sponsor a couple of other festivals down there. So, of course, people love companies that get involved in their community. However, CoStar, being a very large organization, are currently building a 25-story building right here. And it is blocking a view of the river from here, which is where we stay. We stay in a hotel on that street. And yeah. So what is going on down there is they have done the excavation to start building the building, and they've got a chunk of it up. And I have a picture of that. So long story short, what had to happen because of that, the construction and some stuff with the national park, with Tredegar Ironworks, they had to move one whole piece of the festival up here in oops, I keep getting the wrong corner. This corner up here. It doesn't look far. And it's really not, except down here is sea level. It's the river. All this up here are giant hills with like a 45-degree pitch. So I'm going to say getting around the festival was not as fun this year. It, having to walk up this hill, and they actually had a shuttle, which I don't know if they've had that in years past, but, definitely they planned for it, knowing that there's people that'll go down there, I described this the other day, there's people of all kinds that go down there. And so you have people with mobility issues. So I think that's why they had the shuttle, but alas, man, traversing those hills was like killing my knees. Anyway, long story short, we kind of went and set up camp at the Altria stage, and where Bombino was going to play, and we watched the bands that played before him. So this was the band that was playing when we got there, and we saw about half of them. I've seen them play before, Treme Brass Band. Often they have the whole like brass band parade, like the thing that they do, the funeral, the line. This year they only had the one man. He was obviously hot and getting tired. Let me play this clip for you. Most of these clips are like 30 seconds. Okay, so the guy here, he had his umbrella. He had the black umbrella. But at this point, I think he was just, kind of just moving his hands around. It was hot. It was humid. So they were fun. Then, after them, was John Doyle and the Irish American Music Masters. I think they all, at this point, with the exception of one person maybe, live in the United States. But they are all of Irish extraction. And I think I zoomed in on this. This, again, like, people are starting to come for Bombino. And they're staking out their spots because Bombino plays right after these guys. So, kind of what you would expect. Okay. And this, I believe, we get to Bombino. So I think I have a couple of clips of him in here. Hopefully you like rock music. So he sings in his language, which I cannot remember what it's called. So we're going to look at a Tuareg textile momentarily. I got a cool picture of that. But so the Tuareg, they are ethnically Berber nomads, and they are kind of stationed across northern Africa. So you'll find them in multiple countries. Bambino himself, I think, is originally from Niger, but due to war and conflict there, he moved across multiple countries with his I think it was his father and his grandmother, and I think he spent time in definitely in Sierra Leone and I maybe Tunisia. I can't remember what the other countries were, but this was a man who I think he's in his 40s, about 44, and learned how to play guitar as a child in a refugee camp. And what he had access to were videos, and he cites Jimi Hendrix and Mark Knopfler as his inspirations as a child, or as he was learning guitar. Okay, this was kind of the last clip I got where they were shredding. By the way, so Bambino, his bass player and his rhythm guitarist are all African. The drummer, on the other hand, is a white American guy. I cannot remember his name. He wears the African garb. I think what Bambino and his guitarist are wearing are specific, I think, to the nomad, the Berbers, whereas the bass player and the drummer are wearing, I think they're I think it's called a jabella. It's like DJ-E. I can't remember how it's spelled. But it's basically like a long shirt and matching pants. It's very similar to a lot of traditional dress that you might see in the Middle East or India, Northern Africa. It's very similar. So, but it's funny, their drummer, he wears the garments too, but I'm not sure where he's from. But he's an incredible drummer, and he plays, I don't think I got a very good image of him playing the traditional drum, but there is a traditional African drum, and again, it's another thing, I can never remember the names of things, but it's kind of got like a big top, and then it curves down into this like column that's narrower and that kind of flares out at the base, and you sort of sit with you kind of hold it between your knees with that curve. He plays that, and he played that probably half an hour straight, maybe not that long, and it's all played with your hands. Whereas the drum set obviously is, drumsticks, like what we would know. But this man has got percussion down. And it's just amazing to me, again, how some musicians, what they do is very physical, and, the being able to sustain that for so long periods of time playing songs is just amazing to me. So play this one. So that was at the end. And, again, that is not the sound you necessarily expect from a man who, grew up in a family that herded goats and he bounced around between refugee camps as a child. You just don't expect that. Now, what's interesting, again, if you're into American rock, more modern contemporary rock, one of his albums was produced by Dan Auerbach of the Black Keys. So if you know who they are, and that album has a very different sound than what you hear here. He also does some that's a little bit like kind of ska reggae. My husband, of course, has all of his albums because he loves them so much. But yeah, it's so interesting. Okay, so this is the next day, and this is Lonnie Holly, who my brother-in-law went to see and had told us like how amazing and awesome he is. So I'm thinking, oh, cool, like jazz, funk, soul, we love that. Afrofuturistic, I wasn't really sure what to make of that. So I will be honest, Lonnie Holly is not for me. Now, he's an elderly man, and he's quite interesting. He's got a lot to say about modern issues. He's got a song about AI, which I didn't hear, my brother-in-law did. He's got songs about the environment, a lot of stuff. So a lot of respect for what he's singing about. I think he also does some preaching, and I don't quite know the whole story there. I haven't had time to look it up and find out, but the things he was preaching about were interesting. He would kind of do this like improv kind of, and then he would do the songs, and individual pieces of the songs were interesting. He has an incredible voice, like singing some soul music. I think that he would be incredible. His backup singers, the woman here, incredible, beautiful voice. This guy here, his guitarist, incredible guitarist, like just shredded. He also had what you can't see over here. There's a woman who played, I think it was an auto harp. I'm not sure. It was a thing in her lap, and she kind of was strumming it, and it was making sounds like a harp. So you've got a lot going on here. I just kind of like, it just wasn't for me though. And you can get a clip of it here. So this is a clip. Yeah, and so I was not sitting in a place where the acoustics were great, even though there's a speaker right here. So that probably was not a great clip, but it just kind of didn't have the kind of like you can dance to this kind of vibe. So, but also an interesting man. So I did want to look up more about him. I don't know that I necessarily want to listen to more of his music because it's just not for me. All right, so now we get to the textiles, which I know you guys are very interested in. So let me tell you the story about Mamadou. He doesn't speak English. So they needed a translator, and reading between the lines, no, they did not say this, but reading between the lines, I think they had to get a translator for him on the fly. Now, Mamadou is from Mali, and within Mali, he lives in the Dogon region. And Dogon is the name for like this little region of Mali, which they call a country within a country, because culturally the Dogon are very different than the rest of Mali. So they consider themselves like a little state within a state. So Dogon refers to that little state within a state. It refers to the language, and it refers to the people. So he speaks multiple languages. He speaks the Dogon language, and then he speaks, I think, 2 languages that are native to Mali in that area. And then he speaks French because of French colonialism in that area. So his translator was speaking French, and it was very clear they had never met before, and that this translator like literally had just been dropped into the situation. So I think there may have been things lost in translation, because it was clear like the translator would ask questions, and I could, I don't speak French at all, but I could kind of pick up snippets of words that are like the same or similar in English. And I could see like he was asking for clarification on some of the things he was saying. And so, I think just by the fact that the translator, of course, no shade, the man was doing as best as he could, and we got the gist of it. But I think if there had been a translator that had perhaps met with Mamadou before, or knew a little bit more, it may have been a more rich presentation. Now, when they got to the part where there was a Q&A, I had to leave because I was going to something else. But the Q&A, they brought another woman in, and I think she was his actual translator. And she was translating in a regional language. So I'm not sure if it was a language of Mali or language of the Dogon. And I'm not sure why she couldn't have been there earlier. Now, the challenge, she spoke English, but her English, I think, was a struggle. She was multilingual as well. And So I think that was another situation where there was some translation challenges. But I didn't stay for that whole Q&A part because, like I said, I was moving on. But this, as best as I can tell from the translations, is a banner that is, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? It's commemorating his ambassadorship for the Dogon textile stuff. So this is the Indigo Dogon Project, which is what this represents. My photograph makes this look like it's black. It is actually a very, very, very deep midnight blue. So it is indigo dyed. And the stitching on it, or the imagery on it, is actually, I will show you how I think they do this. It was a little, I took some close-up pictures so you can kind of get some gist of it, but this looks like it's stitched. It is not. It is actually absence of dye. And I'll show you how it looks like they get there. But this would have taken a lot of work to make. We're talking like multiple weeks because they first have to stitch stuff, then they do the dye process. And indigo dyeing isn't like throw it in your washing machine and add some, like Rit dye. It's a multi-step process. So something like this would take quite a while to make. And you'll see some of his other stuff. Okay, so here he is with the translator. I don't know what the translator's cape was about. I have no idea. I don't know if he was part of something else with the folk festival, or if he is somebody that they just got from the outside to come in, kind of on short notice. Not sure. But what he has, I think it's, yes. In this picture, what he has in his hand is the actual indigo plant matter. And it's hard to see. Again, I'm under a tent and I'm sitting behind other people, and I'm not one of those people who can like just go up and be like, excuse me, let me take a picture. First of all, I'm taking pictures with phone. So people were like, you get out of here. Even the people with the fancy cameras, like you just have to be polite, and you can't always like just bust your way in there and get good pictures. So it's the best I could get. This tent where this lecture was happening was part of the Virginia Folk Life. And their topic was the textile history for this year. And so there were other lectures that I missed. There's so much to do and see. You just can't do it all. But these textiles back here were the African wax prints from another lecture. And it was really cool. They had this tent, like the walls were just lined with textiles. So he's showing the textile plant matter. Love the fact he had all his stuff in a Kroger bag. Now here he is showing this is what all of the textiles start off as, is plain white fabric. So this would have been this would become a scarf. So it's just like you would imagine if you're going to buy a blank, piece of fabric to dye. This is what they use. And then they have stitching methods, and it kind of shares a little bit with like shibori, also with tie-dye. These techniques, and my guess is this is where our modern tie-dye comes from Japanese shibori and from this kind of work that they were doing in Mali. Because these are old methods. This isn't something they invented yesterday. So, and tie-dye has only been around but so long, but what they do is definitely tie-dye. So it's really interesting. So not 100% sure what this would end up looking like, but I think it's one of the next textiles I'll show you, but I think it's cinched into little knots, little bundles. And so you can see that's this one here. I think that is what that blue one ends up, that scarf, how it was stitched. I think it ends up like this. And you can see, again, I couldn't get close enough, but they're just like little circles of little circles. Like if you've ever seen shibori, it's very similar looking. This is stunning. And I do have a close-up of this textile. We'll see it in a minute, and it gives you some clues about how this is done. But this one is full of this imagery. So
each section of this has a meaning. And what I remember most is the triangle, because that's like a granary. This region of Africa, they grow grain there, the different types of grain, and it's sustenance, and so that's what this is symbolizing. The star shape is a star. It's meant to be a star. Down here, these wide bands are the people, and then the narrow band at the top is, I think, meant to be the sky. So you've got these different levels of symbolism here. And then I can't remember what the squares are. There are two different types of squares, and I'm completely drawing a blank on what he said. And the funny thing about this translator, again, I'm picking up bits and pieces as Mamadou is talking. And he had a very deep, gravelly voice, and obviously the French he's speaking is most likely not like France French. It's the local French, which, tends to change. I mean, just like our English in the United States is different than the British English. So I was trying to pick up, little bits and pieces of what he would say. And he would go into long explanations of something. And then the translator would say, okay, yes, this is a very difficult process. And I would be like, that is not what he said. He said a bunch of stuff. And I was just like, oh, I wish that they had the translator that really knew more about, knew Mamadou individually. But yeah, it would be, he did come back and kind of explain more. But yeah, I think there was quite a bit lost in translation. Okay, this one, he kept moving it. He kept shaking it out. But this one is called, the little design is called a peanut. It's a peanut design. And peanuts grow in West Africa. And so you see peanut imagery on, in many places in Africa. I actually have a brass cast peanut that I use as a keychain. And I don't know, peanuts are kind of a thing that are in my family. My grandfather's family were peanut farmers in Southern Virginia, and I'm allergic to them. So don't send me peanuts. But I don't know, I just have this interest in them. So I was fascinated by this. And I'm very curious. I didn't have a chance to ask the question. I'm very curious how they get the elongated shape. Because the circles make sense to me. You just have to stitch and cinch that up. But I'm not 100% sure how they get these shapes. And my guess is it's going to be similar to what I'll show you in the close-up. But, look at them. They're very even. They're very consistent. And, I don't know how much the textile might be marked, if at all, before they start the process of stitching to, before the dyeing. So it's very interesting. So these were close-ups. This one, I don't think he showed. This one was actually hanging up. But you can see the circles closer, like how, depending, I guess, how much fabric was scrunched up in there that the indigo can't get to. Now, the textiles that are very intricate, that when I showed you with the granary and the star, he said those are textiles that the women create. They take longer. But men and women are both dyers in this area. And so this one here, the one that looks like on the right-hand side, that looks like very much like tie-dye, that is the men's work. They do more simple patterns, whereas the women do the more complex patterns. So I know this looks weird. This was in the bright sun. And so this is that textile, or that indigo textile he was holding up. And this was the next day. They had it hung on the side of the tent. But what you can see here is they're like little chain stitches that have been taken. And, it's creating a resist on the fabric itself. And so when he first said, and let me go back. Whoops. I clicked the wrong thing. Oops. Okay, so this one, he said this piece right here could take 2 weeks. And I think, again, it is because all of that stuff is stitched individually with a little chain stitch. And then, possibly these are little scrunches, tied up scrunches, and then, this chain stitch in all of here. That is the time consuming part, is that chain stitch. And then all of the indigo dye, and then they pull those stitches out. So yeah, this is a time consuming thing. The other thing that's interesting is this is a seamed textile. You can see there are seams here where these pieces are sewn together. I don't know if that is done before the dyeing, if that's something that's done afterwards. Not clear to me. But yeah, I just think to myself of like, the stitching alone feels like just this monumental project. Like, you'd stop there because it's so much. And imagine stitching these on white fabric. I don't know the piece he showed that had not been dyed but had been stitched. It looked, him holding it up, it looked like the stitching was white too, just using like a plain white thread. So, white on white stitching. That's a lot. I would want to use a colored thread just to be able to keep it, where you could see it well. Anyway, a lot of work, and just like very cool. And what they did say, the woman that came in to translate, I caught one of the questions. She said that even though these look like they're kind of, it's a big panel and it has all of these symbolic representations, they do cut this stuff up for garments. So it's not like, oh, it has to be kept like this. So they would still cut this stuff up. And utilizing all of these textiles for garments is a really big deal with all of these separate fabric artisans. Okay, this is the Textile Origin Stories map and poster that I got a copy of. It's very cool. It's, like I said, it points out each of the countries and what, it kind of gives you a visual of what type of textile comes from there. Okay, so this is the monstrosity that's being built that is going to limit our view of the river in the island, and is disappointing. But the reason why I took this picture is they had these very cool flags, and I'm standing like on a walkway. This Virginia Folklife area is actually in a little courtyard that's right outside of Tredegar Ironworks, which was the largest ironworks in the Confederacy, I believe. I think there was something larger up in the north. But Tredegar was a big deal during the Civil War in Richmond. They created all of the iron that was needed for, in the South in the Civil War. And it's a mill. It receives its power from the river. It's got the big mill wheel. And it's been a million years since I've been in there. I have never been to the Civil War Museum because it became a thing after I left Richmond. But that's there too. So anyway, we're in this little cobblestone courtyard. Oh, hello, roll jobber. I think that you are possibly harassing with a little bit of spam. So I'd like to ask you not to do that. Thank you. So anyway, they had the flags with the African wax prints kind of hung like swags over this walkway. So that's what this picture is. And it's very pretty, and they were fluttering in the breeze. I loved that. Okay. So now we move on to Sunday. And this is the Junior Sisk Band. They are all from Virginia. And then I think a couple of them now live in North Carolina, like the northern part of North Carolina. So this is bluegrass. And so this is Junior Sisk right here. Dylan is his mandolin player. And I think I mentioned they're very heavy mandolin. The bass player, I think his name is Scott Love. And then Heather Mabe and Tony Mabe, also they're husband and wife, and they're also part of another group. So they were very interesting. And they played without Junior Sisk also. They played a couple songs without him. So amazing voice on this woman. She has won awards for her voice. So I think we've kind of got a little bit of low volume on this one. Okay, this one might be a little better. This was a long clip. And that man kept walking in front of me. If I remember correctly, this was a Roy Acuff piece, I think. Okay. Now, this next one is, this was a panel that we went to who was right after the Junior Cisc Band. And this was a flamenco group and an Italian dance and music group. And then you can't see him in these images, but a crow dancer. So I foolishly turned my camera the wrong way on my phone. So I have these as portrait and not horizontal landscape, but hopefully you'll get the gist. So she actually, they performed after this, and my husband watched their singular performance, and of course she was in costume then. And for this, the Native American dancer, he was the only one that was in full regalia. She did not have her like flamenco costume on, but I guess they went and got dressed up, and then they did their performance. My husband said she danced for 15 minutes straight. And it was hot and humid. It was a rough day. I mean, you could see people wiping their faces and stuff. That's kind of like very physically intensive work that she's doing up there. And then this was another clip. And this is her husband right here. I always like it when they do the arms. And yes, 15 minutes of dancing is intense, especially outside in the heat, under a tent. You know, these tents, surely you've been to places where you are in these tents, weddings, whatever. They capture the heat of the audience. So, yeah, these folks are amazing. Now, before each of them, and I didn't, because I was just listening, I don't love to watch performances through my phone. I like to just sit and listen. But I did want to get the video clips, and I do this every year. I get little clips just to be able to revisit them. She described, and they're from Spain, and she described the history of flamenco. And it's really interesting. I really kind of just always thought, flamenco, it's this, spicy kind of, dance. But it has like a really interesting history. And they're the Romani, the gypsies coming from Eastern Europe, Sephardic Jews coming to Spain, a lot of different cultures coming to Spain kind of came together with the native dances, and that's kind of where flamenco, I guess, kind of, it's like a fusion. It's a fusion that came along through history. So really interesting. Like I've seen flamenco dance before, but just to find out about that history was like I had no idea. And that's just that's great about these things is you'll see things in a different context than you might have seen like on TV or something. Okay, so this next one, I cannot speak Italian, but Canzonieri Greccanico Salentino is this group, and what they do, what the women's dance, and then there's a fiddler, a concertina player, and drum, it's a drum, but it's a tambourine. It's like a big, with the skin stretched over it, but it's got the little tambourine jingles, but it's big, and that's what the woman is playing on the far right. And so it's called the Southern Italian Pizzica Tarantata. And it's interesting that they use this dance in two different ways. And in one way is it's a healing dance. And in another way, it's just a happy dance. And so she was doing the happy dance. I don't know what the difference would be. But this also has that kind of, like folk kind of, you imagine that it came, like it was a native dance that came, that, over the course of years, it changed and became what it is today. Now they say Southern Italy, they're from, and the way he described it, I was like, oh, I didn't know the Italians use this too. I always thought it was an American thing. When you talk about Italy, you talk about the boot, but apparently that is a global thing. So where they're from is from the heel of the boot. So we'll look at hers. And I took a number of clips because her dance, it transitioned. It went to like a sort of a slower beginning thing, and then she did the thing with her, the scarf, the shawl, and yeah. Doesn't it sound a little polka? It's got a little polka. That's the concertina. You can kind of see the dance steps too, what she's doing. She crosses over and then she kind of does like a little side thing. Now the dance changes a little bit. And there's more arms involved. Oh boy. Okay. And then this is the final one. So you can see she danced straight through. This was dancing straight through those 3 clips, but I could see as I would do, like a 30-second clip, and then I'd see she change like what she was doing. So now this is Christian Parrish Takes the Gun is his name, but he performs under the name Superman, and I missed his actual performance. This I think he did just for this panel. He didn't actually dance this year with his troupe. He is a powwow dancer. I've seen him perform several times. He does. He and his troupe, they do like war dance. There's a women's dance that the women in the group do. There's a multiple of standard stuff that they do for educational purposes, and they're actually different. They're from different tribes that, they come together and not co-opt, but share the different dances. He was dressed in regalia and dancing for this specifically because of this panel. From what I understand, I don't think he raps in regalia. I'm not positive. I missed it. I was so upset. We were watching something else, and we ran into some friends of ours, and they were like, "Oh my God, did you see Superman?" And I'm like, "No." But anyway, he's from Montana. He's part of the Crow Nation, which there is and I completely am blanking on it. I typed it out and it is in my notes, which I can't see now. But the native word for their for crow is what he uses. And again, he's from Montana. And what you will also see is the guys from Italy are recording him because they thought he was so cool. And there's a couple jokes he made. And I think the concertina player, he's right here behind Christian. You can't see him, but I don't think he speaks English. So the fiddle player, who's kind of the spokesman for the group, was kind of whispering to the concertina player like what the joke was, because everybody was laughing. It was so funny. And I just think it's so cool to see that these are performers. They've never met each other. But they come together and they have such appreciation for what each other do. I just think that is so cool. It's this cultural exchange. So the dance that he's doing, it's called fancy dancing, or fancy dance. It's specifically for spectators. It does not have it has a cultural purpose. It's to show off their skills, but it doesn't have the symbolic significance of the more sacred dances. This is one that was really put together just to show off for the public. He talked very briefly about some of the war dance and spectator dance history. He talked about the Buffalo Bill Cody show and all that kind of stuff. So that's sort of the history of his experiences. And so his music also was recorded. He didn't have a drummer, but when I have seen him perform before in his group, they do have the full complement of the drummers and stuff. I also think it's cool the movements that he makes. There's 2 feathers that are right on the crown of his head. The way he moves his head, it looks like, it's definitely got this like a very bird-like feeling to it. I can also say that the regalia that they wear, this particular dance group, at least that he's from, they have all of the traditional materials in their regalia, like the feathers, and there's some beading and sometimes some metal and other pieces in there. And then they're also kind of the foundation of the garments, that have the fringe and stuff. Traditionally would have been like leather, or sometimes some of the trade fabrics would be in there. But they're, it's this is 2024. So they'll make the costumes sometimes with like neon fabrics and, like modern dance fabrics that are all sparkly and neon and stuff. And they're interesting to see because they really stand out. And you get up close and you're like, dude's wearing like, neon orange Nike bike shorts underneath his regalia. And then there's like, neon lanyard laces and stuff in there. It's pretty cool. Okay, this is the final one. And I think this is his final. Yeah, he kind of did multiple. Okay, so then I went over to Virginia Folklife. Like I said, this is the area that I always go to. I'm like, of course I love the music and I love the dancing, but this is like, I cannot miss this. I might have missed Superman rapping, but I would not miss this. So this is Priya Bhagat, and she is a Richmond-based textile artist. Most of what she makes are dolls and some other kind of textile things, and I have pictures of her dolls. But she's done some research on the Maasai Shuka, and this is interesting because this is not something I'd really heard about. Now, in my mind, you can see this picture over here of the Maasai tribesmen, and they're very well known. The men wear these bright red, body wraps. And, I've seen pictures of that. I mean, that's like a National Geographic picture. People see that, you've seen those before. But it never occurred to me that what some of these garments are, they're actually plaid. And there is the question of, did tartan start in Scotland, or did tartan start in Tanzania and Kenya? Or is there some way like that they sprung up independently. So the tartan that she's wearing over her shoulder is a Maasai Shuka. What she's got wrapped around her waist, what she's got wrapped around her waist is a Scottish tartan. And it's really hard to tell. They are very similar, except the Scottish tartan has more colors in it. And the colors, where the colors cross, that you kind of get that different, it'll be tweedy looking, or it'll be like kind of create a different color. The Maasai Shuka is only, like this one here is only 3 colors, and then there's a little strip of white in there. So they're more clear colors. They're less tweedy looking. But there are, I think she talked about 3 different scenarios about how, she had to have been boiling, and it's wool. Some of the newer stuff is synthetic, which also would have been hellishly hot, but it's wool. So the theories about how you end up with tartan in Kenya with these native people, and they still live pretty, they obviously have many of modern conveniences, but they still also live this very, tribe-oriented culture. They're herders, they're bovine people, whereas, the Tuareg were goats and sheep. The Maasai are cattle herders, and they are a little bit different than some of the other tribes in these areas of Africa where vegetarian food may be more common. The Maasai are beef eaters. They are red meat people. So, but anyway, there's just a number of theories. And one of the things she talked about was, of course, the continental slave trade, and, people coming to the United States, pre-United States, coming to this, our continent, and, being enslaved on plantations. And then that there also were the Scottish and Irish, essentially also human trafficked. But they were usually either indentured or they were sent here, because they committed a crime. That's where my Scottish ancestors came from. That's how they got here. But so there's this idea of like, well, could it have, developed out of that? And that one kind of doesn't make sense because enslaved persons here in the United States were not going back to Africa. Like there was Liberia was a repatriation state, but like that was not happening in, the 1800s. It doesn't make sense to me that this cross-pollination of tartan plaid happened in the pre-United States, North America. Another theory was that, the Maasai influenced the Scottish. That one also, it's a little bit hard because it's kind of like, well, how? How was there that trade? The theory that makes the most sense to me, and again, I'm coming at this from the things I've read, the theory that makes the most sense to me, it was the Dutch. The Dutch were highly involved in the cross-continental and transatlantic slave trade. They were big textile people. And so they were responsible for the African wax print fabric. They were responsible for things coming across Africa and into Europe. They were responsible for things coming from India into Europe, and then you have the British, the company that then went in, and so and then there's the idea: could they have just sprung up independently? I mean, who knows? It's just really fascinating. And what's interesting is plaid, Plaide, means like a blanket or a thing that, wraps around you. And shuka also means a fabric that wraps around you. So, there are these pieces of it that you're just kind of like, how, who met who? There has to be some link. And it, again, it's just question mark. There is an artist named Penny Sisto, Sisto, and I was vaguely familiar with her work, but then I heard an artist talking about her recently, and she is from the Orkney Islands, which are up there north of Scotland, and, the cold, vicious North Sea. And she ended up going to Africa as a midwife I believe in the 60s or 70s. She was a missionary and as a midwife. And she lived with the Maasai and acted as a midwife in a Maasai community. And she was fascinated by their textiles and was like, I've got to know more about this. So she lived there for quite some time and, really studied it. And I don't know that she ever came to any conclusions either. But her artwork reflects... She's a quilter and a textile artist, but her artwork reflects what she experienced living there in Africa. And so I wanted to read because I know it may not be easy to see, but so the Maasai shuka would be found in Kenya and Tanzania. And it says the Maasai people of Kenya and Tanzania are pastoral cattle herders, where cattle ownership indicates wealth and status. The Maasai live in a highly organized societies where there are clans, chiefs, and councils of elders. Women oversee trade. That was interesting to me. Women do magnificent beadworks and the formation of homes. The Maasai are known for their shuka, or body wrapping in the Maasai language, which had been worn for over 15 centuries. So, again, long time, as are the tartans. Shukas were originally made using animal hides dyed with ochre, so the mud, the pigments that are in the mud, to help its wearer blend in with the red clay of Maasai land. Later, shukas were made from fabric and possibly influenced by the colonial presence in Kenya. The color of the cloth identifies the different sections of the Maasai people. Now, the red tartans are for men. And then the women's tartans, and I think one of my pictures shows the women's tartans are like a purpley blue is one color that they may be. So the women are definitely visually separate from the men in what their shukas look like. Hey, Quiltish. So Quiltish says a traditional kilt is a long piece of fabric that is folded and wrapped without any fasteners. Yep. And Kate says, be interested to see their spinning. Yes, absolutely. Would definitely be. Really any of these cultures. And, nowadays, like the indigo dyer, that fabric is probably purchased, they would get that from some type of fabric supplier. They're not spinning and weaving it themselves. But yeah, some of the other cultures, like you look at the fabric itself and what the what the thread looks like, what the textile looks like, and you can kind of imagine, and think about what their weaving process might be like. So these are Priya's dolls. Like I said, she's a doll maker. So she makes these, and they are cast iron skillets for the faces, and they're embellished with all kinds of different fabrics and beadwork, and then some of them are found objects. They're really cool. I can imagine they're probably pretty heavy, those cast iron skillets. But yeah, you can see like this one's got kente cloth in it. This one is like wrapped wires, and this one is the Maasai shuka shredded, and they were long strings. And then you see some more beadwork and things. So very neat stuff. And then these are some more of her dolls. These are smaller, more traditional looking like doll baby dolls, like and then she had these nice little placards that explain things. And then this one back here, this is a tartan that would be worn by the women. So this is like a woman's shuka. I took this picture of mainly to get all these textiles that they had on display. And then, so what it says here is, to fully understand today's African American textile artist, we must understand his past. His? They were all women. By understanding his culture and valuable contributions made to America by his race, we must go back to his ancestral beginnings in Africa. What is known about African textiles can be traced to influences from other civilizations. From four civilizations of Central and West Africa. So it is the Manda, the Yoruba and Fon, the Ajagam, and the Congo. And they are specific to the countries. So Martha is my new friend. I got a chance to talk with her for a while, and hopefully she'll be able to watch the stream. And I told her I was like, would love to drag you on and talk quilting. But she has an amazing quilt collection, and she had some of it there. And it's not all just what you see here. She's got some other things we'll see. She's also a doll maker. And this quilt, she and I talked about this quilt for a while. It's tied. And she said she's not positive that it was made by an African-American person. She really doesn't know because she bought it, without provenance. But there's some aspects of it that could have come from an African-American home. And there's some symbology in here that she really liked. And one is the turtle. And, if you've seen quilts from the 30s and 40s, that's a common pattern, the turtle. There's also ships. There's a ship down here. And then some of these crossroads blocks are why she thinks possibly that this could be an African-American quilt. And I told her I would find what some of these were. This one especially, and hopefully you can see my cursor. There's one here that's like white and a dark fabric, and this is blue and red, and this one's yellows. Neither of us really knew what that one was. And I was worried I couldn't find it. I kept looking and looking. I finally found it last night. And now, of course, I'm drawing a complete blank on what it's called. But it is in Barbara Brackman's encyclopedia. And then this one up here is a little bit different, but kind of similar in terms of these they're almost like Drunkard's Path kind of curvy things. That one's called Virginia Snowball. And that is one that I had never heard that name and seen that name before. So that was interesting too. Let's see. So this was, I went to talk to her the first day or Saturday, and I had completely forgotten she was teaching a little workshop. So I ended up showing up there when she was teaching her workshop. So I didn't get to talk to her that day, but I did get this quick picture of some of the stuff she had. And yes, she had a Harriet Powers quilt. And we talked about Harriet Powers and Gee's Bend, and I asked her, was this a replica that did you make it, or did somebody make it? It is a Smithsonian. And if you're not aware, the Smithsonian was very bad, got their hands spanked by the quilting community because among some other textiles, they had Harriet Powers quilt. This is the Bible quilt. They had it reproduced by, like a Chinese factory in, I guess this was in the 80s. It was supposed to be fundraising for the Smithsonian. And yeah, I mean, you go to any museum store today, they have products that are made of the things that are in their displays or their, exhibits and collections. This one was a little problematic though, because, people were confused. They didn't know what it was. They didn't understand the whole idea of this, these cheap reproductions that are, so people really complained. People got real upset. My friend and mentor, Mary Kay, actually went to DC with a contingent of quilters and talked to the Department of Commerce and was like, this is not cool. This is, you're really degrading this important piece of history. So they stopped, but those quilts they're out there in the market, and, you can find them sometimes. Sometimes they're kind of expensive, and sometimes you can get one for a song. So, she and I talked about that for a while. This piece right here, is one of her quilts that she made, and, very pretty. And I didn't get a great picture of it. And then back here, she has, one of the flags. This is actually from Benin. This is a little bit different than the Asafo, the Fante flags that are, they're regimental flags that are sort of meant to be like, proving to their enemies how badass they are. But I don't know as much about these, but I think they're a similar thing. They're probably kind of the same idea. This one back here was actually kind of a long, narrow one. And I guess when they hung it, somebody helped her hang and covered this one up. She had a few other textiles over here too. So all of this stuff was from her collection. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then her dolls are back here. And the sun would not cooperate. So I'm trying to take pictures and I'm getting all this glare. But these are dolls. And she doesn't sell them from what I understand. I'm like, Martha, these are so fantastic. Like, why would you, but I also understand. I didn't ask the question because I'm like, I make stuff that I have no intention of selling. I want to display it. I want to show it. I maybe want it to be in galleries, but I don't necessarily want to put it out there with a price tag, So I think she kind of feels that way about her dolls. But these up here are famous African Americans. There's Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman. I'm trying to think who else. They all had little labels laying down in front of them. And then these are more like rag dolls that she's made. And then I think this might be one of her quilts down here. So very nice things, very cool things. Now, the Elegba Folklore Society. They apparently have been around a long time. I did not know anything about them. They are in Richmond, but they also do things throughout the Mid-Atlantic. So if you're in my neck of the woods, look at their website. I actually have it pulled up here. See, I will share their link. Whoops, that's not the one I wanted. Nope, not that one either. Here we go. Okay, where are you? Here we go. So here is their link if you want to check them out. So they kind of spearheaded this the Textile Origin Stories display. So they had put together the people that were part of this. So Mamadou and Martha, Priya, they were the ones that coordinated all of those folks. So they had a tent with a display of all of these different types of fabrics. And then in the middle of it were more like handcraft type stuff. And then they had a guy selling baskets. And he was being swamped by some people that wanted to buy baskets. So I didn't really spend much time over there. But I did get the pictures of these different types of textiles. So the first ones. So this is the Bauli cloth from the Ivory Coast. It's kind of got that like ikat kind of look to it. And this says the Bali people live in the Ivory Coast in West Africa. They are one of the country's largest ethnicities, numbering more than 4 million. The strip weaving traditions extend back to the 17th century. The Kuro people have lived adjacent to the Bale, and they share some textile practices. And I think you probably see that a lot, in all different communities that have a native or folklore type craft. People in proximity to each other share their, we see this with quilts, when you see a quilt that's like named Virginia Snowball, but then you see it in North Carolina. Well, it's because people went back and forth. They shared stuff. So I think you see a lot of this in these African cultures that, where there was some, there were obviously issues between groups, but also issues that the groups shared sort of textile intel or whatever. So this is an indigo-based cloth also. So Senegalese tie-dye is over here, and this really looks like the tie-dye we know and love. Unfortunately, I did not get the picture very well to be able to read that to you at this very moment. I should have left these on my phone so that I could look at them, but very traditional looking tie-dye stuff. The Bogolan or Bogolan, this is from Mali also, as we looked at the indigo, and that's what's on the right hand side, the Dogon. And look how different these two textiles are. They, the indigo is obviously all blue. This Bogolan is stamped, with a that those designs are not woven in. They're stamped on. But as we already looked at with the Dogon indigo stuff, those designs are stitched before the dye. Before they're dyed. And I think with this particular one is a situation where they did a light dye. So they only let the color develop a certain amount. So it's a very light blue. And then they did the stitching. And then they did a second dyeing, which made the fabric darker. So I think that's what we're seeing here. The Yoruba Aso Oke. This is Nigeria, Benin, and Togo. And they told me this was this is a very old textile. This one's antique. And if you look at this, is this not like some quilts? I was just looking at something, with this dog tooth edge or this sawtooth edge. And that's what we see here. So some of these images definitely sprang up in different cultures all over the world independently. And, I think that this is a perfect example, that sort of jaggedy edge. It's a great way to embellish. A plain stripe is kind of boring, but when you put a jaggedy edge, there's some interest there. There's movement. Many cultures, people have, innate creativity, and this kind of stuff just makes sense. You want to make your stripes look more interesting? Give them a sawtooth border. So kente cloth is from Ghana. And this is probably very familiar looking to you. I often, lots of folks that are, reclaiming African history will use the kente cloth for garments and head wraps. This was a fun little quilt that was made with a variety of fabrics, and then it has cowrie shells stitched on it. I had to take the picture kind of from an angle because there was a woman talking to one of the Alegba Society people. And, you go to things and you're like, you wanted to say, hey, get out of the way. And you kind of like edge in and you're like, excuse me. But this is the best I could do. But I thought this was really cool. The way that the fabric had been used, and then these cowrie shell embellishments were very cool. Okay, so Kuba cloth is from the Congo. And it is, I believe, dyed with mud. Vegetable dyes. Raffia. Okay. So this is made with raffia. So it's a very I don't want to say coarse, but it's not scratchy. Let's put it that way. It's not like, like burlap. It's not like that. It's not hairy, but it's a firm cloth because it's made of raffia. And, it's just got a different hand than the fabrics that are made of, cotton and wool. And then again, we've looked at the Masai Shuka. Papery. That is a perfect term for it. And like I said, I think that these dyes and things come from their vegetable dye and the ochre that's in the soil or in the mud. So these are pieces that are from the Ivory Coast, Mali, and Burkina Faso. And this is where the Tuareg people, the Berbers, they come in. So you've got a bunch of different cultures across these countries. And the look of things is very different. So this is like some little deer. And then this is a band. And I have a better picture of this next, I think. Yeah, so here we go. Oh, and these are the drums I was talking about with Bombino's drummer. That's what the drum looks like, and it's held between your knees. And then I guess these would be dancers. So I thought this was a kind of a neat, I guess like a tapestry. It's painted, and as simple as the characters are, I mean, you get the gist of what's happening here. That they're playing music and that these two people are dancing. So the Tuareg cloth. I wanted to touch this thing so bad. They had the signs up, please don't touch the textiles. But how pretty is this? So these are the blankets, and they're used by the people as blankets, but they're also used to protect the horses that they put them on the horses. And I would assume on the camels too, because there's a guy on a camel in the picture. And so these are, you can see, let me just jump forward to the picture. You can see this is like a narrow, like a backstrap loom kind of weaving. But they get this, it's like chenille. It looked like chenille to me. So it somehow in the weaving process, they've got these threads that are loose. And, I kept looking at it, and I wanted to reach in there and kind of pull on it and see. I'm not sure how they get that, but it's very chenille-like. And then other strips have these little bumps. And to me, that looks like, it's like the weft has been wrapped around several strands of the warp, and then moving on, and then wrapped, and then moving on. That's the only way I could figure it out, unless there's some other way they do it. I don't know. This was such a mystery to me, and I kept looking at it, and And of course, my husband's texting me going, where are you? I'm trying to look at this textile. But yeah, this was just such a beautiful piece that I really loved it. So, and that was the end of that. So let me go back real quick just to look at this. So you've got this flag thing here. I don't know if that's got a significance. I think it might be a flag. But yeah, so this whole piece here is kind of sort of the top of the blanket. It's not really centered because it's folded over. They have it folded over this stand, and I would say maybe 2 feet of it is flipped over the stand. So it's probably about as much as this piece here. It's not as big as this bottom, so I don't think that this is centered. But yeah, just pretty stuff. Interesting stuff. So, and that's my husband coughing in the background. He just got home. So, that was the folk festival. So, if you live in one of those communities that still has a folk festival, highly recommend. I feel like they're all probably operated very similarly. They kind of have some standards, I assume. And, it's such a great thing to take kids to. And I've just never seen anybody have a bad time. There's just so many things to look at and so cool, And I didn't get to go last year because my cousin got married that weekend. And the year before is when I went to TwitchCon with Mary Fawns. So I didn't get to go that year. So it's been a couple years, and I don't like to miss it because it was very fun. I need to get out to the one that's actually in Maryland on the Eastern Shore in Salisbury. But that will be eventually. Well, let's see. It's getting up there. It's 3:45. I should have paced myself better because I was gonna give myself a half an hour. I think we don't really have enough time today to get into the lady. Well, yeah, I think I'm gonna save her for Monday. The chapter's short, but I think it'll take us a little bit longer than I want to today. So I think I'm gonna cut it off there. I hope you enjoyed the textiles. Obviously that was the thing that made me, I could have probably skipped the dancing and the music altogether and just stayed with the textile people. Obviously that's my passion. But yeah, it was a really nice trip, and it was a lot of fun. And again, the weather was the only problem, but 'tis the season, right? If you are familiar with the East Coast and the Mid-Atlantic, Kate, I know you just came back from here, from this area, and yeah, it's just not a great season for these things, but they have them when they can. Hey, Mod Art. Yeah. Yeah, and the thing is, they don't always have textiles, but they always have something like costumes. There will be something like that, maybe it isn't about like quilts and fabric, but there will be something with, like traditional textiles and traditional costume. So there's always something to look at, there's something that'll be different that would be interesting to people like us that have these kind of interests in textiles and stuff. So, but yeah, I highly recommend it. They're definitely, across the country, places that are still doing this, and, California in general has lots of cool things too. I'm trying to remember. I don't know that any of the National Folk Festival, I don't think in my reading that they went to California. I want to say it's like they almost stopped kind of in the middle of the country. So I don't know. I don't know why, but yeah, definitely get to one. All right, guys, I'm going to let you go for now. We will be neck deep in the Lady of Godey's next week because, again, I just love Sarah Josepha Hale so much. And like I said, we were going to get into the crinolines and the bustles. So we're getting into the fashion stuff next. And then I think we move on to trains after that. So you're going to learn some things about the Industrial Revolution that I don't think you were expecting. So, all right, have a wonderful weekend. Oh, before I forget, if you did not see... now the question is, what did I do with it? Here it is. I want to make sure you had this link. If you missed me and Jill's interview with Mary Kay Waldvogel, and you weren't there, you got to check that out. We had a lot of fun. It was super silly. Mary Kay is always willing to... improv and do anything. And so there was an impromptu reading of part of one of the interviews. It was just really fun, and it was such a great conversation. So even if you were not reading the soft covers for Hard Times book with us, check out the interview, because it just, we touched on some topics that I thought were super interesting. So that will leave you with that plug. So I will see you guys on Monday. And you have a wonderful weekend. And I hope the weather is good. And again, any of our dear friends out there still struggling with Helene, I hope you are getting everything you need. You're probably not watching this, but, I hope folks are getting what they need. And, the cleanup and the getting back to normal is moving along. Because I know that's very scary and bleh. So, well, take care, you guys. And I will see you on the flip side. Mwah, 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 mwah. Bye.
Every dog must have his day. Sweet, I'm so tired of you. Sweet, I'm so tired of you treating me this way. And then I'm, sweet, I'm so tired of you. tired, sweet, I'm so tired.